Michael. What's happening, man?
Shalom, brother Sutton.
Peace.
Black power, my brother.
Peace, my brother. I got brother Shaka Utmost in front of you.
Hey, Hotep, my brother. I think we've spoken before. He called him before at the House of Cant. He was asking me a lot of existential questions about God, and yeah, I'm familiar with the brother. Hotep.
Brother, how you doing, Shaka, man? Good to talk to you again.
Oh, wonderful to hear from you, myself, my brother. I'm too blessed to be stressed and very grateful. The Netchers have blessed me, so I'm just grateful to be here talking to you.
That's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. And the same way you opened up is the same way you opened up last time. So I see you the same brother.
Absolutely. Every time. Keep it truthful. What can I do for you, my brother? I'm sure you have a question or a statement.
Absolutely. Well, it's a question and a statement.
Okay.
And, I don't want to be too long-winded because I know you may have some other things to do. But the video that I saw the other day with you and the brother Ali Muhammad, right? You all were speaking about the Septuagint.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to clarify your particular position on the Septuagint's validity as relates to its geographical position where it was documented to be created. Not talking about the existential part of the book or the hexpillars and all of the joining texts that created the Tanakh and the later books in the Bible, because we know that was an ongoing work. Do we agree on that?
Yeah, sure.
So the original book and the documents that was contained in this so-called Pentateuch, I want to get your real opinion about it as relates to it being a document created at the behest of a king.
My opinion about it?
Yes.
Well, what I usually try to do is I try to keep my opinions out of it, and I try to go directly to the historical record. That's what I try to do.
Well, I'm asking for your opinion. I'm asking for it.
My opinion is going to be what the historical record says. And what the historical record says is that, okay, hold on. I see what you're saying. As a matter of fact, I like the way you posed it because it makes more sense, actually, than what I was about to say.
Right on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even the historical record has to be examined. You can't take something at face value just because it's a historical record. You have to put it in its proper context. So you're correct. All right, what the historical record would like us to believe is that because quite often what you will find in the historical record is actually propaganda that was instituted as the official historical record. So when it comes to the Septuagint or the 70, the historical record would lead us all back to the Library of Alexandria in roughly the 3rd century BCE. It would lead us back to Ptolemy Philadelphus II, and it would lead us to a story that talks about how Ptolemy Philadelphus II, or Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who was the son of Ptolemy #1, Lagi or Soter, Savior, Alexander's general, that this particular Macedonian king of Egypt, at the behest of his librarian, I think either Philo or Phileron, the custodian of the Library of Alexandria, I'm pretty sure it was Philo, that he suggested to this king, Ptolemy II, that he send away to Jerusalem and bring the learned men of Jerusalem to Alexandria, Egypt, so that they could translate their holy scripts, their Torah, so that they could translate their Torah into Greek, so that the Greek-speaking Jews of Alexandria would be able to read the Holy Scriptures, the Hebrew Holy Scriptures. Now, this is the story. And as the story goes, he did send away for these Hebrew, or for these wise men from Jerusalem. Supposedly 70 of them came. They were divided in groups of 12 and put in different rooms to translate the Torah into Greek for the supposed Greek-speaking Jewish population of Alexandria, who had their original Hebrew tongue taken away from them because they had been in captivity in Babylon prior to coming to Egypt. So therefore they have lost the ability to read, write, and speak Hebrew. This was supposedly the impetus and the cause for King Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, to send away for these learned wise men from Jerusalem and come to Alexandria, translate their Torah into Greek. And this is supposedly how the Septuagint, which is the very reason why it's called the Septuagint, the 70, that this is why it was brought into existence. Okay, and in fact, the story even goes further that once it was officially translated, that King Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, the Macedonian king of Egypt, that he was so pleased that he remarked that, wow, this must be a sacred and divine thing, because they all translated their Torah identically. And that he was very pleased and threw a big party and threw a big celebration, because now the Greek-speaking Jewish population of Egypt now had their own sacred scripture that they could read. Now, that's what the historical record says, that we have been, that's what you call the historical party line. That's the school of thought that you are taught.
That's party line.
That's the party line that you're taught.
Right.
But anybody who has done real research on the origins of the Septuagint, first of all, I really like the work done by Ali Muhammad on a lot of these supposed original biblical manuscripts. Most of them are forgeries and fakes and much later than they claim to be.
Now,
hold on, 1 second, hold on. Let me finish.
I'm sorry.
Most of them are much later than they claim to be. That also includes the Septuagint. One of the earliest ones which they claim to have is the Hexpala, which was put together by Origen, who was one of the early church fathers. Now, the problem with that is that the Hexpala is supposedly a re-establishment or a restoration of the original Septuagint, which was supposedly held in the Library of Alexandria. Now here's the problem. I don't care which Septuagint you pick. What Old Testament scholars have found is that, and linguists have found, is that, oh, by the way, that story that we were talking about the Septuagint, we can, thank you. So that story dealing with the Septuagint comes from, it's propaganda. And it comes from a particular letter. That letter is called the letter to Philocrates or the letter of Aristeas. This is what Jewish people or Western white people, if your child is going to school, and this is also what your pastors in church believe, and probably your rabbis in the synagogue and your imams in the mosques. They all believe this party line. Maybe not the imams in the mosque, but your pastor and the rabbi, and the dumb Sunday school teacher and the dummy teachers in the public school systems throughout America and in the colleges. They believe this. They believe that that this is how the Septuagint came into being. But that story about how the Septuagint came into being comes out of a letter. That letter is called the letter to Philocrates or the letter of Aristeas. The problem with that letter is that letter is known to be pseudepigrapha. It is a fact. It is a known fact that the letter of Philocrates and the letter to or the letter to Aristeas is pseudepigrapha, which means it is a false superscription. It is a letter that was written at a much later time that was superimposed or attributed to an earlier figure who lived centuries earlier, which means it's a fake. Hold on, which means it's one second. Which means that it's a fake. So if the letter
I'm not
to
saying nothing, brother. I'm still being patient.
Okay, I'm almost done. So if the letter to Philocrates and the letter of Aristeas is a fake, that means that we have to dismiss the story about how the Septuagint came into being. So if we dismiss that story, then we have to look at what the actual evidence of the Septuagint says. And what the actual evidence of the Septuagint says, according to some of the best Old Testament scholars out there, is that when you look at the Greek that the Septuagint was written in, that Greek does not reflect Jerusalemite Greek at the time. If that story was true, that's in the letter of Aristeas, that means that the Greek that the Septuagint was written in, it should reflect Jerusalemite Greek, the Greek that was spoken in Jerusalem at that time. But it does not. What linguists have found out is that the Greek that the Septuagint is comprised of reflects Egyptian Greek. That means the Greek that the native Egyptians learned to speak. So what that means is that the original documents that went into making the Septuagint was put together, it was translated, the documentation process or the translation process was not carried out by any learned men from Jerusalem. The translation process, whatever those documents were, those documents that later on produced the Septuagint, the translation process was actually carried out by native Egyptian scholars that spoke Greek, because the Greek that they wrote the Septuagint in, the idioms, the language, the syntax, the morphology, it reflects a particular identity. So we know that the Septuagint is an Egyptian Greek product. It does not come from anything relating to Jerusalem or Israel or the Hebrews.
Okay.
Okay.
Now,
I had to establish that before we move forward.
Okay, that's beautiful. Now, that is what is called, again, you said it before, that's called the propaganda. That is, that's made known to the world, the widely known propaganda. Right, the letter of
Aristeas, the letter of Philocrates is the propaganda.
Okay, let me address that. Because I talked with Dr. Williams, and this is exactly what me and Dr. Williams
Professor Williams, Professor Walter Williams.
Okay. Yes, Professor Williams. I'm saying doctor.
Yeah.
Professor Walter Williams.
Right.
Great conversation and a great brother.
Yes.
Now check this out. I wanted to say this to him, but the conversation got too long.
Okay.
But now watch this, Shaka.
Okay.
The letter of Aristeas is without a doubt considered to be pseudepigrapha, a false document.
Yes.
But watch this. Okay. The letter of Aristeas itself only deals with a request that a document be made.
Yes.
Are we in harmony on that?
Yep.
But the letter of Aristeas does not deal with the factoid in the book, the timeline of the Septuagint, the original Pentateuch, and even those hexapullas, that sixfold book interjection.
Right.
Now, one second. I'm gonna let you question me, but let me lay a premise. Now, watch this.
Sure.
When you spoke about, and that Professor Williams spoke about Demetrius Soter first, right? But the tradition of this documentation, which claps hands with the Dead Sea Scrolls, goes back earlier than Demetrius Soter. This is just where this moment in the Ptolemaic period.
I'm sorry. I have to stop you for 1 second.
One second.
Before you move forward, we have to clarify something. You keep referencing someone named Demetrius Soter. Who is Demetrius Soter?
162 to 150 BCE, brother.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. That you weren't confusing Demetrius Soter with Lagai 1, who's also referred to as Soter.
No, sir.
Okay, no problem.
Absolutely.
No problem.
So to be accurate, that what we're talking about, Demetrius Soter, is still around this time of the propaganda story. This is, and I'm saying to you that the clapping hands of the Dead Sea Scrolls with the Pentateuch, it precedes that. And also into the life of the later portion of the...
Hold on 1 second, brother. What precedes what?
Even the factoid information. Like, let me give you. Antiochus III, right? The Great. Antiochus III.
Okay, Antiochus. All right. Antiochus. All right.
The third.
All right.
The Great. The Great.
Okay.
198 to 187 BCE, right?
Right.
That precedes Demetrius I Soter.
What do you mean that precedes? You're not making any sense at this point.
Precedes.
I know what precedes mean, but you're not giving me a scenario that precedes another scenario. You're just using names and the word precedes.
So let me answer to you, brother,
okay.
So you can listen to the statement, so you can understand the direction where it's going.
Okay.
Okay, I'm saying that because what you put forth before, the propaganda story, in which I do not have any argument for, because that is the historical story, right? Story. But we have a harder history when we look at the lives of these kings and we look at the lives of the Judean people. Now, being that you employed Josephus, as relates to the story of the Septuagint, we have to look at the life of Josephus and the time of Josephus. Now, when we deal with Ayudea Kata, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. You're talking about the Didache?
No. This is a coin.
Oh, okay.
Ayudea Kata, and it's stamped.
Okay.
Right. This is the coin that's on the front of Josephus's book.
Okay.
Right? Now, without going through the whole coinage of Greco-Roman history, we know that is also accepted history, not propaganda, right?
You're talking about the coin.
Say again, sir?
Are you talking about the coin?
Yes, the coin. The coin itself.
Would you do me a favor and spell the coin, please?
Okay. You can say it here, English. The letter that would be congruent with an I.
Right.
The letter that can be congruent with a U, which would be a V shape. And D.
Brother, can you just spell it out? I-U.
Okay. I-U-D-A-E-A, brother. Ayudea Kata, just as I said it.
Okay, spell the Kata.
C-A-T-T-A.
C-A-T. Okay, Kata. Okay, the Judea Kata.
All right. Now, we're in congruence with accepting that coin as documented hard history. Am I right?
Okay, it's there. What about it?
No, I'm asking you a question at this point.
I don't know anything about it, so I'm learning as you're teaching me.
No, okay, I understand that, but I want to move along with you. I don't want to, be disrespectful.
Okay, let me say this. Rather than me studying, let's just say I can't concur with something that I don't know. So, I dig that. So you can finish with your diatribe.
Okay, I dig that. Now, what I want to show you, outside the Bible, outside the pages even of the Septuagint, which you said is devalidated by the letter of Aristeas, and I'm telling you, I'm validating it by history. Okay, when we deal with this coin and the coins that preceded and superseded.
How does the coin? Okay, hold on. How does the coin substantiate the letter of Aristeas? Why don't you cut to the chase?
Okay, listen. The coin does not substantiate the letter of Aristeas. The coin itself validates the existence of a people under the same system that they were documented in the Septuagint and the Torah. Both traditions, Palestinian and the Greek. So I'm trying to show you what's called a synchronism, Shaka. Do you understand what synchronisms are? You do.
I understand what synchronism is, but I'm trying to establish. I don't understand your main point. Hold on. Is your main point to prove that Hebrews existed? Is that what your point is?
Okay. Well, this what I'm trying to say to you is
I'm trying to understand where you're leading. What you're doing is you're throwing out piecemeal facts to say that this substantiates that, but it's not creating a big picture for myself or anyone listening.
No, I'm glad you said it's facts so we can proceed. So you accept what I'm saying.
The only thing that I accept, I'll tell you what I accept. What I accept is that you have brought to my attention a coin called the Judea-Capta coinage. That's it.
Okay.
I don't know anything about the coin, so I cannot.
Okay, let's synchronize it. That's why I brought up to you the word synchronism. Okay, this is what we do in history.
Absolutely.
Where there is a gray point, where the lines blur, and perceptions meet, right?
Sure.
Minor and major perceptions.
Yeah.
We use synchronism. Now, if I'm telling you that this coin is connected with the man Josephus, the time period, and the ruling cultures, economy, socio-political structure, and their rulership over these people. The same.
I need you. Okay, hold on. You're zooming.
Hold on 1 second.
Hold on, brother.
Please,
you're zooming.
please. One
brother,
second.
Hold on. 1 second. Look, you're not. We're intelligent people. We're intelligent people.
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
We're intelligent people, so we have to proceed an intelligent way.
Absolutely,
You said that the coin. Hold on. You're talking about synchronicity, right? You're talking about synchronicity. Hold on, brother. You're talking about synchronicity, and you're saying that the coin somehow relates to Josephus. I don't know how and what way this coin relates to Josephus. So until you establish that, you can't just move to the next trapezoid and think like it's okay. You got to establish point by point, fact by fact. You're failing to do that thus far.
Okay, so we can look at the date of Josephus' life, brother. We know it definitely is claimed to be 37 AD, right?
37, okay. 37.
100 AD. You said 36. We can accept any number that's flexible.
What, Josephus?
And we can synchronize the life of Josephus and that coin, Shaka. That's what I'm saying to you. Why I'm bringing up that as a synchronism, brother.
Okay. All right. So okay. All right. No problem. Okay. So the coin existed. I'm following you, but I have to follow you my way, okay? So
I take it,
okay,
brother.
so hold on.
Whatever way you want to do this. Yes,
all right, cool. All right, so what you're saying is that the Judea-Capta coinage existed at the same time that Josephus did, under the same conditions, correct?
No. I'm saying that the economy, that's why I said it before.
Okay,
the economy and the socio-political structure that is the Greco-Roman Empire existed during the time of Josephus. That's why this coin is on his document.
Okay, no problem. I have no problem with that.
Absolutely. So can we proceed on from that?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so now the next point that I would want to bring and still keep that on the table is, again, the document itself, the Septuagint. Even in the back, when we talk about the Maccabees, and I talked to Dr. Smalls about this one, he says that the book of Maccabees is his favorite. Well, one particular book out of the book set. It's his favorite. And I respect that, brother, just as I respect you and Dr. Williams.
Wonderful.
And I respect the truth in the brother. You understand? And I know he wouldn't accept anything that does not have any factual basis. Maybe he rejects the rest of the book. But that is where I'm hanging my hat at. That time period, that political structure, that economy, that time period is where this story and synchronism begins, around 200 BCE, from Antiochus III, or considered to be the Great, all the way up to where Demetrius Soter is. This is where the actual on the ground history of the Septuagint and its makeup, this is where the real history lies. So I think the world has gotten, I don't think there's any argument with what you put forth, but I think the world has gotten an overall bad look at it because the letter of Aristeas takes you into another mental space. But if you deal with the actual history, it's really there. The people, the time, the events, and the timeline, because, and this is the last closing statement on that, the timeline of the Septuagint is much different, and I know you agree with this, than the majority text, correct?
Well, actually, I haven't done the research into that area as far as dealing with the majority text is concerned, as it contrasts the timeline in the Septuagint. I do know that most Bible scholars don't give much credence to the majority text, which a lot of conventional scholars have a problem with. So they do certainly go for the older text, or what they call the Alexandrine text, or the Septuagint. They give much more credence to that. And that's fine. To me, it's neither here nor there. I don't care which period you're in. I think for the most part, I'm going to share something with you, my brother Michael, if I may.
Yeah. Please do. Go ahead, brother.
I'm not one of these people that says everything in the Bible is not true. I think that anybody that says that has not really studied history. At least from my perspective, I can say that. And I personally, I'm one of Professor Walter Williams' biggest fans. That does not mean that I agree with every single thing, every position that he holds. You understand what I'm saying? I would say that I agree with a lot of it. However, I also have a very sneaking suspicion that if I was to sit in a room with Professor Walter Williams and he was able and gave him the opportunity to show me certain things, I have a feeling that 99.9% of the time I'm going to agree with him. But because I have not had that opportunity, I have to go quite often with my own research, which I genuinely respect because I look at evidence, I look at facts and things of that nature. So with that said, to me it doesn't matter if you're dealing with the majority text, the Alexandrine text, the Didache, or the what they call the
Syriac traditions, yes.
Or the Syriac traditions, any of them. I mean, to me, it's the majority of it. The problem with people today is that what we fail to realize is that when we are reading these materials, we fail to realize that we are reading materials that were written at a specific time by specific people for specific. And that they were written, I'm not finished with my statement. And that they were written,
I'm all ears. Go ahead, man.
And that they were written for a particular audience. And so therefore, the problem is that the wrong audience has received the wrong material. And by virtue of that, they have extrapolated truths that were not meant for them. They have extrapolated from this literature falsehood that was not meant. They have extrapolated worldviews that were either not meant for them or have nothing to do with them. You understand what I'm saying? So,
I agree with that.
So now, let me say this last. Last but not least. I have a problem with a lot of people who are still talking about this whole Hebrew thing because they speak as if they did not see the presentation that I gave at the Kimenon trial debate, where I showed through the documentation, through the best archaeological research today, that shows through the evidence, what the evidence says. If you look at the work of Israel Finkelstein out of Hebrew University, and if you look at the work of his partner Neil Sieberstein, these are two of the top Hebrew archaeologists who are doing the cutting edge work on archaeological remains that as it relates to Israel and the whole Levant, even as it relates to Egypt. These guys are at the forefront of the game. So I can't listen to people who aren't dealing with the cutting edge information. We're dealing in a time we could get stuff almost real time information. So to me, if you're not talking about Finkelstein's work or Silberstein's work, I can't really jive with you because you're not talking about things from a point of the point of the evidence. And what the evidence says is that Israel came into being because of the implosion of late Bronze Age city-state polities in Canaan. Because of what was taking place in Canaan, at the last period of the Bronze Age, because there was a migration, you could even call it an exodus, because there was an exodus of the urban population of Bronze Age Canaan, late Bronze Age Canaan, or Bronze Age 2 Canaan B, Bronze Age 2B Canaan. Because these people left that region and migrated into the hills or the hill region of the adjacent countries of what we call Israel today, it's at that point that you have settlements appearing at Iron Age 1A. At that point, immediately, you have settlements appearing in Israel and what became Judah. And so you get two brand new economies that did not exist there before. Well, they could not have existed there before because the people who were there were previously in Canaan. So you couldn't have an economy where people were not. So you get an economy at Iron Age 1 in Israel and Judah because those people who left Canaan, they were Canaanites. That's why he says in the book, lo and behold, these people who we are calling Israelites were originally Canaanites themselves. They were just Canaanites. That's all they were. They were people residing in Levantine and Canaan, whatever identities they called themselves by, their little tribes or this, that, and the other, right? They did not become a state. They didn't even become a, hold on, one second. These people did not become a state until the Iron Age. There's no such thing as a Bronze Age Israel. There's no such thing as even a Bronze Age Moab. Why? Because these people have no identity until the Iron Age. That's when they begin to create their stories. You understand? Their stories don't even predate the Iron Age. You understand what I'm saying? So it's nonsensical to talk about these people as if their identities were real, the way we are reading them back today. You want to talk about the Hebrew people, when you look in the historical record, there's no even, when you look at the archaeological remains, there's no people referred to as Hebrews. So what are we even talking about?
Now, let me interject here, Shaka.
Sure.
All of that you said is great, but again, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
But when I talk about a scholarship versus maybe a point of conjecture, and you saying you accept Finkelstein and the others' works as modern cutting edge.
Sure.
But let me show you something that Finkelstein leaves out of all of his archaeological work and dating. Now, here's a principle. Watch. Neo versus migratory. Did you hear what I said, brother?
You said neo versus migratory.
Yes. Okay. Now, let me show you. In the time period that you're speaking of, which is called the Iron Age, which is like around 1200 BCE, right? About 1200 BCE. Yeah, that's the beginning. Yeah. Right. Now, that area or that time period has a very strange, another synchronism. But we won't deal with the synchronism. I want to deal with the people called the Hittites, right? Yeah. Now, here's what Finkelstein won't tell you. Okay. Finkelstein will only tell you what you just spoke about, which is the considered Iron Age Hittite kingdom. But truthfully, I can take you back to way before that kingdom and the migration into Anatolia of the Hittites. So this suggests two kingdoms separated by from 2100 to the year 1000. That's 1200 year difference. Now, between that, you have the later kingdom, this Hittite kingdom, brother. I'm sorry, hold on, I'm sorry. I got to need you to back up a little bit because I never said something that interrupted me. Okay, I'm sorry. That, it kind of hijacked the rest of the interview about the Moors and the things that's coming up. Right on, man. Yeah, right? No, I wasn't. But go ahead, I got caught. No, but look, if you got to do something else, man, just get my number, bro, so we can talk. I'm not interested in the craziness. I just want to deal with you on the information. Okay, so let's deal with the information. Spirit is more than that. Interview. All
right, Mike, man, yo, I'm gonna give you
You can give him my number.
I'm gonna give him. I'm gonna give you Shaka's number. So y'all can
get it from you, brother. I love talking to you, brother. For your time, man. I appreciate you, man. Yes, sir. I appreciate you, man. It's good. Second time, so I know the third time we speak, it will be even greater.
It's gonna be even better. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right,
Okay.
peace, brother. What's up?
Absolutely.
Peace, Sonetta. Peace,
All
man.
right.